Hello, everyone.
Welcome back.
Ooh, welcome back. Ooh. That's my wife, Katie.
That's my husband, Josh.
Happy that you're here with us. This is Book Club Date. Today, this is
Our second book.
our second book. This is episode 1 of 2. Our second book is The Wager, displayed behind us. The Wager by David Grann.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get into that, Katie, as always, my question, what else have you been reading?
Nothing else.
Nothing else, just The Wager?
Just the wager.
Just The Wager. That's okay. That's good.
Yeah.
I'm still...
It was a busy week. We are kind
Yeah.
of getting back after the holidays.
Yeah.
So we are now into 2024.
Ooh, that's so exciting.
It's very exciting.
So yeah.
I do have a question for you.
Yeah, fire away.
What books are you looking forward to coming out in 2024? If any.
None in particular.
I've got one.
What is it?
I've got two, actually.
All right, fire away.
The new one by Sarah Maas. It's the book 3 in the Crescent City series.
Okay.
That one's coming out this month.
All right.
Stormlight 5.
Oh yeah. Sanderson.
But that's not till November. But
Yeah.
or is it December?
I don't know. It's basically a year away.
It's the end of the year
Yeah.
that it'll come out. But yeah.
Yeah, I guess I gotta decide if I want to reread or skim, or maybe if there's like a rundown somewhere.
I bet we can find a rundown on YouTube.
I'm not sure if I
There's
if I want to
so
read.
many details.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I want to read from Way of Kings all the way to Rhythm of War.
Yeah.
That's a big commitment, and I'm going to read other books.
Yeah.
So that's exciting, though. So you're excited for those two?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Those
Yeah,
are
that's where I'm at.
those are 2
Mhm.
very good books to be excited about.
Yeah, I thought so.
I like it. So let us know in the comments what books you're excited about reading this year,
Yeah.
and we might put them and feature them on Book Club. We might make them a read. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I've just been reading Mindburn. I'm approaching
Yeah.
about halfway through on that.
Nice.
Again, that's a cool sci-fi, cyberpunkish, AI's taking over. Everyone's basically an android kind of thing.
Oh,
It's cool. It's pretty cool. But okay, let's get into The Wager, 'cause that's what you all are here for. So we read. We suggest that you have read chapters 1 up to and through chapter 11
Yes.
for this episode.
Which is basically the first half of the book. It's kind of misleading. I will let you guys know. If you look at the book, about a quarter of it, I would say,
yeah,
of the actual pages are just notes and
references
and
appendices.
references
Yeah.
in the back. Yeah. So
because it is a historical book, basically.
it is. So there's a good chunk of notes, and that can be a little misleading if you kind of monitor your percentage read if you're reading on Kindle, or even if you're just like holding the book and you're kind of like, oh, I've got so much left to go. How is this half? But it's half of the story.
Correct.
It's
Yeah.
the first 11 chapters.
Correct. We're not gonna unless you want to. No judgment. Feel free to read the resources and double check David Grann if you want. But
Yeah,
I'm not
you
going
can
to.
read through all the notes. We will not be doing
Yeah.
an episode on those.
Yeah. Well, Katie, tell us what this book is about. Is there a synopsis about this that we got
We
here?
do have a synopsis for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, in September of 1740, during an imperial conflict with Spain, the Wager, an English ship carrying some 250 officers and crew, had embarked from Portsmouth in a squadron on a secret mission to capture a treasure-filled Spanish galleon known as the Prize of All the Oceans. Near Cape Horn, at the tip of South America, the squadron had been engulfed by a hurricane, and the Wager was believed to have sunk with all its souls. But 283 days after the ship had last been reported seen, these men miraculously emerged in Brazil. From the author of Killers of the Flower Moon, a page-turning story of shipwreck, survival, and savagery, culminating in a court-martial that reveals a shocking truth. The powerful narrative reveals the deeper meaning of the events of The Wager, showing that it was not only the captain and crew who ended up on trial, but the very idea of empire.
David Grann is the author of this book. Here's a brief little bio about him. David Grann is a staff writer at The New Yorker. He graduated from Connecticut College in 1989 and earned a master's degree in international relations from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy and master's degree from Boston College in creative writing. He has written for the New York Times Magazine, The Atlantic, The Washington Post, The Wall Street Journal, and The New Republic. His stories have been published in numerous anthologies of American writing. His books include The Devil in Sherlock Holmes, The Lost City of Z, A Tale of Deadly Obsession, and The Amazon, which won the Indies' Choice Award for Best Nonfiction Book of 2009. And, of course, as previously mentioned, Killers of the Flower Moon, The Osage Murders, and The Birth of the FBI. That last one is a new Scorsese film, actually. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, this is our final little spoiler warning. This is up to and including Chapter 11. So, from this point on, we are just going to talk freely about this, even though this is based on historical stuff. So, it's not super spoilery.
If you know, you already know.
Yeah.
But if you don't know, then spoilers.
So, anyway, let's see here.
So this includes Chapter 11.
Yeah.
125 pages.
So, I mean, I don't think we need like a play-by-play, but basically, up to where we've read is there are seamen and sailors in the King's Navy that some embark of their own fruition to go on this voyage. Others, not so much. I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yeah, so...
they attempt to go around the bottom of South America, the Cape Horn.
Mm-hmm.
It's universally agreed to be one of the most difficult waters to navigate, and I think the Wager does a really good job of explaining why. It's actually kind of crazy.
Yeah.
The Wager crashes. Of the men who haven't died to this point, whether on the ship or during the crash, they're shipwrecked. Mm-hmm. Some local natives end up helping them out eventually. The Kawaskar, which they're pretty interesting.
Up like a pronunciation, because for me, like hearing, maybe it's the musician part, but like hearing a new word helps. But it was really, I couldn't find a good example. Of the actual pronunciation. So,
well, we'll do our best.
Apologies if we pronounce the Kawaskar a little weird, but
but the natives, they help them out, and then some of the shipwrecked crew offend them, and then they leave. And that's kind of where we leave off.
Good for them setting boundaries.
They're setting boundaries, right? And that's kind of where our initial reading stopped. So
yeah, that's our kind of summary. So let's kind of get into this.
All right. So your general first impressions of the book. This is not your usual speed. You would not have chosen this. I know that for a fact. So,
no, I would not have.
I am curious. What are your thoughts on this?
I felt, and I don't mean, my very first impression was I'm reading a documentary.
Okay.
Like it just, to me, it read like a documentary script. And I think I actually would prefer it as a documentary because then I would get like some visuals along with it. And I think that would really help because I told you this the other day, like it was really quite difficult for me to get into it and get started. And I think part of that is just because my sailing and ship jargon is not up to snuff.
Okay.
Like at all. Like it's been a while. It also gave me Moby Dick vibes, and that was in high school that I read that. So it was a while ago. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gave me very Master and Commander, starring Russell Crowe. That movie, which is phenomenal, by the way.
I haven't seen that
one. Well, it's really good, actually. Well, I think it's really good.
But I think anything that, like, for this kind of thing, which is, like, very niche, right? Like, the specifics of these ships and the vastness of them, but also, like, because they're described as, like, being so big and stuff, but, like, from the outside, right? Because then on the inside, it's kind of, like, space is at a premium.
Right.
So some of them, like, I think he gives you a good idea to where you can visualize these things, but also like you don't know what you don't know, and being like unfamiliar with this kind of thing, it did remind me of like, okay, I'm reading the script for a documentary. Like that's how I felt.
Yeah, I think we should watch Master and Commander, and then you'll have like a visual to pair with this.
I mean, if it's historically accurate.
Oh, it is.
Oh, okay.
It is.
Okay.
It is. Like I was watching the special features on it, and not, bit of a sidebar, but apparently like the waters.
You're
right?
here for the sidebars, though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a podcast. It's long form.
Empire.
Skip ahead if you don't want this. But in Master and Commander, I was watching the special features, and this is years ago, but the waters that they filmed it in, I forget the director. The director was very insistent that the waters have to be a certain color because different waters in different parts of the ocean, regions of the ocean, are different.
Yeah.
So apparently people who are well versed in the story of Master and Commander, which also is based off of historical events, know what those waters are supposed to look like. And apparently they did a decent job
of replicating those
replicating
colors.
that. And also just life on the ship, it's like they do.
It gives a good picture of it.
It does. Like, I actually think even if you watch like 20 minutes of it, you'd be like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a visual aid now with this book. So.
And it was, I did think it was interesting that he kind of follows certain characters and he kind of presents those to you at the front end. But like, they don't all start off on the wager, like, and it's not just one ship going around. It's like, what, 5 ships or so that are making this journey.
It's an armada, so it's a grouping of ships.
So it's a grouping of these ships. So there's like 5 man o' wars and then like 2 scout ships or something like that. And the wager has basically been retrofitted. I mean, and also they kind of like, it seems like this journey was doomed from the start. Like, it took forever for these ships. Like, they kept getting postponed because they had to do all these repairs before they could even start the journey to begin with. The wager was not intended as a warship. It was a
merchant ship.
It was a merchant ship.
It was meant to carry cargo.
That got retrofitted with all of these cannons and stuff. So, yeah, it seemed like there was a lot not going for them. And, like, the journey was postponed for over 9 months before they could even begin to set sail. And then,
like, and to your point, there's a little line here that from the book that the Navy classified warships by their number of cannons, and with 28 she was 6th rate, the lowest rank. So she was christened in honor of Sir Charles Wager, the 74-year-old First Lord of the Admiralty, and the ship's name seemed fitting. Weren't they all gambling with their lives?
Because they knew this passage around Cape Horn was difficult.
And even if they got around
on the best day, it would be difficult.
Yeah, and keep in mind their goal, right? Their orders are to find this Spanish ship, which is the prize of all the oceans. But it's apparently a really powerful ship, which is why they're sending like a whole armada after it. So it's kind of like even if they did get around Cape Horn,
going into Spanish territory, right? Because South America was divided. Portugal got Brazil. The half with Brazil, so the eastern half,
right?
And then Spain got the western half, so like along Chile,
right?
So they're also going into, like, I would say, enemy territory,
right?
And going to attack. But it's just crazy. It was interesting. Sorry, going back to the beginning. They were also talking about the issues of staffing these ships and how difficult it was because they were at war with Spain.
Yeah, what did they call those gangs? Those ones that go around and basically abduct.
Incentivize sailors.
Yeah, they just go around and abduct sailors. I forget what it was called. What they called the gangs. Anyway, if you can recall, let us know in the comments. But that was like, can you imagine?
Like an enforcement gang or something like that. It was wild.
Yeah, that they just go around and they would look for the tar on the fingertips of former sailors' hands, and that's how that was one of the ways how they would identify them. And they would basically just force them into indentured servitude, basically. Like, I assume if they were freemen, they would get a wage, but it was like, no, you're coming with us. You get the privilege of being in the King's Navy now, right?
Yeah,
and it's just
congratulations. And they would tear, like, men who were just getting back into dock, who had been gone, they would pull them into service
from
and they were
merchant
like,
vessels coming back into port.
Yeah, and they were
would
like, we just
kidnap
want to
them.
see our families.
Oh yeah, it just frankly sounded awful because they were at war with Spain, right? So
Yeah.
it was kind of
So they were kind of like
Yeah.
at their limit of volunteers. Like there were no, I
Yeah.
think they were called press gangs.
press gangs. That's what they're
I
called.
think that's
Thank
what they
you.
were.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I didn't see
It's handy
it,
having that book
so-
there, huh?
It is, but I didn't actually see it. It just kind of came to me. So.
Press gangs.
So
Yeah.
I think they were press gangs because
That-
they would press
that's
you
what they
into
were-
service.
That's what they were called. How do you take away the fact that you're a woman?
Mhm.
How would you have felt about being
Being forced?
Yeah.
Oh, I would have hated that.
Yeah.
I don't take well to that kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah. That's why a lot of people
and
ducked
that kind
and ran.
of
right?
that kind of pressure. I'd be like, I'll show you, and I would probably sneak away too.
Yeah, like a lot of them
Yeah,
dead.
yeah.
know?
Like I don't know. I don't blame them
Yeah. Why do you
unless I felt like. But if I felt strongly for the cause, I would volunteer. So
everyone feels strongly until they have to put their blood and sweat on the line? Then it becomes a little different. So, why did the wager crash? There are like so many reasons as to why, but
oh my
is
god.
there?
Well, but okay. So leading up to this,
Mhm.
insane amount of issues
Yeah.
prior to this crash.
Yeah.
Like they ended up they wanted to get through Cape Horn at a specific time of year because they were like, oh, it'll be easier before winter hits. Little did they know that when winter hits, the waters or the winds for the direction they were going are actually more conducive to a slightly easier passage.
Mhm.
So they went at like, it just timed at like the absolute worst time. They didn't think to eat limes. Like I didn't understand why limes were
Scurvy.
considered not good at the time. But so they end up like the whole armada or whatever, the whole grouping of ships, they all got scurvy.
Right.
And the one ship or the one island where they stopped prior to making the actual passage around Cape Horn was chock full of limes, but I guess they didn't know what limes were at the time. And so they could have stocked up on them, but they didn't because they didn't know.
Yeah, it's just,
And
it's just ignorance. It's not, not ignorance in like the bad meaning of it, just
yeah.
they didn't know. They didn't know what they didn't know.
But the one doctor, I get, like, there were a couple references he made to people, like, not wanting to use the term scurvy.
Yeah.
Because of the stigma. And I was like, so you know what it is.
Yeah, but they don't know what
But
causes
did they
it.
not know?
They don't know. They didn't know what caused it. They didn't know it was a vitamin deficiency. Right? Because you can get scurvy today if you don't get enough vitamin C. Right? And vitamin C is in vegetables and fruit primarily.
Yeah.
Right? So
well,
on a ship you might not have
horrible.
that. Oh
it
yeah.
Sounds horrendous.
Teeth falling out.
Yeah, and like, ugh.
Yeah,
the tissue between your bones, like,
Mhm.
and I did think it was crazy that how it was like old wounds would open up.
Right.
And like the one guy had a broken femur and like
And it rebroke
in
the same spot, which is not supposed to happen with bones.
Yeah, I was like this is insane. Like that's
And the one guy he had a gash from a battle like 50 odd years ago or something like that, and his gash reopened, which is just like ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's actually interesting because in the book Shogun, when they're on their ship at the very beginning of it, I forget his name, but they're aware of scurvy in that book.
Oh, okay.
And they are because the character that you're following for that section of the reading, he spaced his fruit out, basically, like his duration, and a lot of the other men didn't, so they were all out of fruit, but he had hidden his and like gradually was eating it steadily. So like he was in pain, but he wasn't like
as bad.
The symptoms weren't like manifesting on him, right? So like he was still keeping it at bay.
Yeah.
Like I think the worst was like his gums were bleeding.
Ooh.
but he was but like he wasn't like falling apart at like the
Yeah.
seams, you know?
Yeah.
So
Like some of these guys
yeah.
suffered. And it was just like the amount of death once they got into Cape Horn, like into that passage was
Oh
just,
my gosh, just brutal.
oh my gosh. Like when they're like, oh yeah. And like, so like it was like the first funeral, they were basically able to like have a funeral at sea.
Right.
And then after that, just with the quantity, they just were like
Tossing people overboard.
Yeah.
It's just like, what can you do?
Just
You know?
unable. Yeah.
No, it was like, what did they call it? Let's see here. They said,
I mean, at one point he
as Samuel Johnson once observed, no man will be a sailor who has contrivance enough to get himself into a jail. For being in a ship is being in a jail with the chance of being drowned.
Yeah.
I thought that was a very
Quite the
observant.
description.
Yes. And frankly, all of the descriptions that Grann gives you throughout the first part of this journey that like we've read, yeah, I mean, that's 100% what it is.
Yeah.
It's a jail where you can drown.
Yeah.
You know, there's no limited medical care, limited food, rations, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it's the military, so I'm not going to say the fact that you report to a commanding officer is crazy, right? But
Right.
on a ship, the captain in that time, they were everything.
Yeah.
They were essentially God on that ship, short of a mutiny happening. So,
Right.
it was not for the faint of heart to
And it did
to
seem
embark
like
on a journey like that.
captain, the guy who was in charge of the whole grouping of ships, was well respected.
Yeah.
So at this point, they've disappeared. We don't know what's happened to them.
Yeah. I mean, do you think they made it around Cape Horn, or do you think
I have no idea.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out in the next reading because
Yeah.
this thing, we know that this book ends in effectively a trial,
Mm-hmm.
a court-martial-esque type. What the hell happened? Investigation, courtroom proceeding. Right. That's why that's why David Grann, like he's able to write this because logging back in that time and probably even by today's standards is huge. Like even in Star Trek, we make fun of it, right? Where they go, Captain's log, right? Because they're logging the events. Right. So it's
all written down. So
Right.
I did think that was interesting that he had access to firsthand descriptions and experiences and was able to kind of compile those.
Yeah. Did you catch how Buckley noticed that some of the logs had been destroyed before the ship went down?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, oh, someone doesn't want someone to know something.
Yeah. But
It's probably cheap.
it was also part of what Cheap had been told by the guy in charge of this grouping that I feel bad not knowing his name. Hang on,
That's okay.
It's right here. But I do think Anson,
right?
Anson, because they name a mountain after him, and there are maps in the front of the and back of the book.
Yeah,
which is helpful, so you can get a picture of where it's at. But
and please forgive us. There are just a lot of names.
There are a lot of names, and there's not really. He didn't have like actual descriptions of most of these guys, like what they looked like. So it's really difficult to get like a visual in your head about like what this guy looked like.
Yeah. It's like the only two that he really gives any type of real visual descriptors is King, who's kind of like the bouncer enforcer on the ship to make sure that you're doing your job, and Duck, who is the black sailor.
And that's what we know about him.
Yeah.
There's no height, no descriptions
Yeah.
of these guys, but
so there's no real good way to like differentiate them other than like what their ranks were.
Yeah.
So,
but I thought it was in Anson's just directions to the captains of each of the ships. If your ship is going down, destroy everything you can.
Right.
Because
that's a good point.
Because their mission was supposed to be secret. Like it was supposed to be a secret that they were going to attack this Spanish treasure.
Well, there's also charters, basically routes, and those were very protected, right? Like you don't want the route that English ships are going in this particular region of the world you don't want the Spanish to know about that.
Yeah.
Because then they can set ambushes and various other things, and then they know that's an important route for you, right? So
Right.
yeah.
And
So
as we discussed, they're going round into some more solidly Spanish territory
right.
rather than the Portuguese territory.
Or
So
at least where there's like a Spanish presence that they are certain is there.
right.
Yeah.
Right. So that was definitely a possible issue.
Right. Let's see here. Let's talk about Cape Horn a bit. Here's another passage. At those ends of the earth are no chronicles, Melville wrote, except for the ruins of spars and hulls that hint of dark endings, of ships that have sailed from their ports and never more have been heard of. He went on. And practical Cape, you may approach it from this direction or that in any way you please, from the east or from the west, with the wind astern or abeam or on the quarter, and still Cape Horn is Cape Horn. Heaven help the sailors, their wives, and their little ones. So basically, Cape Horn is just like it's near the bottom of the globe, at least as how we frame the globe usually, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was interesting that part of the reason why like it's so violent is one, that it's just very rocky down there. Two, it gets very cold, like in the winter, summer.
Well,
right?
It's between the tip of
South America and Antarctica.
The most northerly tip of Antarctica.
Yeah, so you have two continents in this stretch, and if you think about the bottom of the globe, there's nothing really stopping water from moving. So effectively, and again, I'm not an expert in ocean currents or anything, but from my understanding from David Grann's reading, is especially that essentially that there's this never-ending current at the bottom of our world that just pushes, and you have Antarctica and South America, and this water just flies through it, and it creates a not ideal situation for sailing.
Because of how they're going around, the waves are getting amplified. So the crests and the troughs are like even bigger than they would be elsewhere where they're being stopped. Right.
Yeah. So like there was this fun sailing where it was like below 40 degrees latitude, there is no law. A sailor's adage went. Below 50 degrees, there is no God. And that's in reference distinctly to Cape Horn, basically.
Yeah.
It
seems like the height of these waves down there can just get insane.
Yeah. There's, like this other, sorry, I'm just reading passages today, but each time the wager went over a wave, Buckley felt the ship hurtling on an avalanche of water, cascading into a chasm devoid of light. All he could discern behind him was a looming mountain of water. In front of him, nothing but another terrifying mountain. Mm-hmm. First off, that's a great bit of writing.
It is.
I think that very much paints the picture. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would be scared out of my mind. Like,
oh yeah, yeah. And I think one of the other things too was he starts to get into like just how dreary and indistinct the setting around you gets down there too, because it was always cloudy and misty and stuff. And at one point he even says, the ships underwent the same transformation, sometimes appearing like huge ruinous castles, sometimes in their proper shapes, and sometimes like large logs of timber floating on the water. He concluded, we really seem to be in the midst of enchantments. And that's Millichamp said that. Mm-hmm. So it really paints this picture of, you've got this grouping of ships. Not only are they trying to traverse this difficult part of the ocean, but they're also trying to stay together.
Right.
And just how difficult that was. And it was interesting, I thought, how they would, set off their gunfire every so often with a certain frequency to be able to identify each other and stick together.
Yeah. There's no walkie-talkies.
No walkie-talkies. But apparently Anson had some, it seemed like a very basic megaphone, right? Where he could like yell to the other captains. Like if they were able to pull up close enough, he could use this device to talk to the other captains at least.
Yeah. And the ocean is vast, right? Mm-hmm. So like the reason, like the cannons seem kind of, I read this one post where like someone thought that the cannon signaling was silly.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, no, because if you've ever lived and you've tried to shout and get someone's attention who's maybe 50 yards or more away, you have to shout to get their attention because of the distance. So yeah, I mean, like you need like a loud noise to be like, yes, we're still here.
Right.
That's basically all it is. Like you can't, like you could fire a gun, you know, maybe one, we're here, we're fine. Two shots, we're in distress.
Yeah.
Right. You could do something like that.
And like I'm sure ships today have horns, but back then, these large wooden vessels.
Yes. Also, just a quick plug. We did pull some of these questions from the website book-club-guide.com. They seem to have a pretty good reference for book club questions if you'd like some, but we did pull a handful of these questions from there. I just wanted to give them a little shout out because I yoinked it straight from them.
Nice.
And
we can link that website too, so it's easier for you to find.
Yes. So one of the questions that they had were, this is kind of a paraphrase of what it was, but what elements of colonialism and racism present themselves so far?
I think there's several elements of colonialism and obviously racism, though a lot of the sailors, only the one was identified as being black.
Correct.
And that was it. So we don't really know the percentage of different races of the sailors, but he did mention with that particular individual that he had the additional potentially fear of if they were caught by the Spanish, he could be sold back into slavery, even though he was a free man.
Right. Right. Which is like a double threat, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's just awful.
Yeah. And then at this point, like, all of South America basically has been divided up into colonies of these other European nations.
Right. Just like a oh, we'll take that, we'll take this, never giving any thought to the
indigenous peoples.
Yeah, to the indigenous people, to the civilizations, the communities that already live there.
And I think at this time Magellan had already gone through, they had already spread diseases that the natives were not, their immune systems were not prepared for. And so he did mention like some potential hesitation of the natives that the shipwrecked people of the Wager encountered. Like there was definitely some concern, like, oh no, they're not going to want to help us, they're going to want to stay away because they've already been burned by these other guys that came before us. Right.
Or they've heard
the stories
through the grapevine of their part of the world that
stay away.
Yeah, white people mean death.
Yeah.
Right, and it doesn't necessarily mean by axe or sword or something like that. It could mean just their mere presence.
Yeah. Kills
you. So I mean, but all that to say is and again, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing this. The Kewiskar, the natives who helped them,
they were fascinating.
They were very fascinating. So fascinating, in fact, that this little bit was kind of interesting. So, as we mentioned, this is near Antarctica, very cold, or at least down like the bottom tip of South America. So they were saying like the
waters are basically like, so they've at this point where the shipwrecked, they got slightly around the bottom point. So we're up a little bit north, but like it was, I want to say. He said the water was like 45 degrees.
Yeah.
To freezing. Like.
So cold.
Cold. Yeah.
Yeah. You're not going to last more than, I don't even know.
I think it was like a few minutes before risking.
Hypothermia.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where you start getting sleepy.
Yeah. But it was fascinating how he explained how the Kewiskar used like seal fat to cover themselves so they could go into the water. Like they primarily lived on the water, it sounded like, and in their canoes, and how it was just fascinating how they used all of these resources around them so well, like so effectively.
Yeah. And centuries later, actually, NASA, hoping to figure out ways for astronauts to survive on a frozen planet, sent scientists to the region to learn their methods. So these people have been there for thousands of years. And it's just like they're so in tune with their environment and the
Yeah.
cold and the wet and how to navigate it and how to handle it.
Because a lot of the land down here was barren.
Yeah, rocky, barren. So you were living off fish, seal.
Mm-hmm.
There's very little vegetation. You can't really farm because it's so, right? Because they were on like an island, right? And then I'd have to look at the map, but they could see the Andes.
They could.
Right. Like they
yeah.
could see them effectively across another little strip of ocean to the mainland, which is where the Andes would be. So even if you lived on the mainland, which these natives probably have traveled back and forth from there, who knows where they actually lived in that area, but they'd probably been to the mainland before.
Yeah, it seemed
Like,
like they
the
were
Andes
just
are
kind
just
of
like a wall.
nomadic and just like would go up and down the coast kind of.
Yeah.
But they got a lot of their resources actually from in the water. And in one scene, he described a Kawaskar woman diving down and having incredible breath support because she held her breath for quite a while in this freezing cold water and brought back up a basket filled with sea urchins. And then she, dropped it off in the canoe and then hopped back in and got some more.
She just went straight back down.
Yeah. So not only did they know how to survive in this climate, but they knew where to get these resources from the water and how to do that. You don't just know how to hold your breath that long. Like that's a learned skill.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was just a way of life for them. Again, just very in tune with their environment and all that. So, well, let us know in the comments what you have thought so far of the reading. I think there are so many angles to discuss this book from. You've got colonialism, you've got the natives, you have the shipmen, you have sailors, you have, just life in the 1700s in general and how it was on a ship. There are just, I mean, we discussed a big portion of this even talking about the ocean, Cape Horn.
Right. And at this point,
and
what's crazy is that like with that passage and with the scurvy, they lost like half of the crew.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Just brutal.
Yeah.
Just brutal.
Not just on the Wager, but on every ship. It was like at least half the crew.
Yeah, and I think
gone.
that's important to remember is they were part of an armada and they were all hurting.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and
I think at one point they were saying like each ship was losing like 10 men a day.
Yeah. I mean, so it's in looking forward, I can kind of see, but I don't know for certain, but this seems like it's going to become a more Lord of the Flies-esque kind of scenario because they're all stuck on an island together. Right.
Yeah.
And I think there's going to be camps of people, which was already happening. Like there's
already
splitting off.
a very tenuous order to things.
Right.
Like it is not.
Well, the captain has a primary job, which is to keep the ship afloat.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's already gone out the window.
And Captain Sheep did not do that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I did want to ask you too, because 2 of the ships disappeared during the traversing of Cape Horn. What do you think happened to those?
I think they just turned back. I think they said, screw it.
That's what I suspect as well.
We'll deal with the consequences whenever we get back home.
Yeah.
I think is what happened because they'll just follow their route back. They'll probably stop at the same place that they stopped before to replenish. Right. But I think they were like, this just isn't worth it.
Yeah.
Which who can blame them? I mean, it's a terrible, it's not the fun type of adventure.
No.
No. This is an adventure with a sad ending for sure, and you can kind of already see it. So, but yeah, thoughts, comments below. Like and subscribe for future episodes. Let's jump into some of these remaining highlights.
Oh,
yes.
Sorry, there were a couple other things that I thought were interesting.
Okay, fire.
When they get shipwrecked, they actually start to do better because, as far as the scurvy goes, because there was wild celery growing on the island. So this barren island, but there did happen to be celery. And that was helping with their scurvy. So I did find that interesting.
Yeah.
That actually was like helping a little bit,
Yeah.
even though their resources were very limited.
But you can see, though, how back then, since they didn't know of the microscopic biological world really at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you can see how they would just associate the scurvy as something you just get on a ship and no one knows why. And then once you get off a ship, it usually goes away.
Yeah.
Right. But they would never assume.
They would never connect those dots.
They would
necessarily.
never connect their diet to it.
Yeah.
Right. I'm sure someone did, but
yeah.
But the word did not get out.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I thought was interesting, one of the characters that we follow is actually the poet Lord Byron's grandfather.
Yeah.
So at this point, I'm like, at least this one guy I know is going to live because he's going to have kids in order to have grandkids.
Right.
So I know this guy will survive.
He's going to make it.
That's like the only one that I'm like, this guy, I can count on him to live.
Well, we'll see. I mean, you don't know that for certain.
Don't take this from me.
I'm not. Okay. You can have it back. I think he'll live. I'm just.
It seems like he'll live.
I'm just teasing. Some interesting things that I noted were that, quote, constructing a single large warship could require as many as 4,000 trees, 100 acres of forest might be felled.
Oof.
That is a tremendous amount. That is a tremendous footprint.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just disgusting, but creatures like this exist. Pterido navalis, a reddish shipworm, can grow longer than a foot, and it ate through holes. Columbus lost 2 ships to these creatures during his 4th voyage to the West Indies. Ugh, can you imagine that? I looked this thing up.
To. Yeah.
Ew.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds gross.
Another one is the captain had to be father and confessor, judge and jury to his men. These are really fun, huh?
I thought these were really interesting. Sure. There's a lot of phrases and things like turns of phrase that we use even today, and
sayings.
Yeah, that are actually based on different terminology that was used while on these ships. So this part was interesting. To toe the line derives from when boys on a ship were forced to stand still for inspection with their toes on a deck seam. To pipe down was the boatswain's whistle for everyone to be quiet at night, and piping hot was his call for meals. A scuttlebutt was a water cask around which the seamen gossiped while waiting for their rations. To turn a blind eye became a popular expression after Vice Admiral Nelson deliberately placed his telescope against his blind eye to ignore his superior's signal flag to retreat. And I think, under the weather was another one. Right. Based on like which deck they would be in, because they were on deck, you were exposed to the elements. Right.
A lot of interesting sayings that just kind of emerged. So
yeah, that we still use today.
Are there any sayings that you know of that perhaps David Grann didn't put in? Let us know.
Yeah, let us know in the comments. Those are always interesting.
They are.
Yeah.
We're going for engagement, people. Help us out. Come on. All right. Well, I think we had a great discussion and a wonderful first reading on this book. Mm-hmm. You were kind of hesitant to read this book.
Very. And it was difficult for me to get into it.
Yeah.
It did take me a little longer. Just because I was like, what does that mean? What is that? Like, it just...
Yeah.
It was not as fast a read for me.
I suspect the second half you're going to be like, oh, okay. Yeah. I'm here. I'm in it now.
I mean, it's not like...
I'm going.
Yeah. It's like reading a documentary.
It is.
Yeah.
So I think I might have you watch a little bit of Master and Commander at some point.
Oh, okay.
So if you want to.
Okay. We'll see.
But okay, well, our wrap up. The next episode is going to be the last one for this book, The Wager, by David Grann. So that next episode is going to cover up to the end, including the epilogue. So be sure to read that, and we'll talk to you then. You can find us on podcasts anywhere you listen, or YouTube, If you're watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe, or subscribe to us anywhere. I don't know. Leave a review. Anything helps. We appreciate it.
We do.
If you're listening to us and you're enjoying the conversation that we have weekly, just know we appreciate you. And we'd
Glad
love to hear
have
from you.
here. Yeah.
So until next time, that's my wife, Katie.
And that's my husband, Josh.
And this is Book Club Date. We'll see you next time.
Bye.